for the invitation. So what I'm going to talk, actually, the talk is based on a paper I already published. Actually, the title is not that awkward. It's simply how to defend a small state, Hanfeizi, Plato, and Mencius. But then I was told that that title might be misleading. It sounds as if I'm going to comment on present international affairs. This paper was written 2 years ago, which has nothing to do with what's going on today. And so what I did in the past 10 years was to construct a kind of Confucian political philosophy that can serve as alternative to the liberal democratic models. So I have a book out by Princeton University Press called Against Political Equality, The Confucian Case. And now I'm moving to another important school in traditional Chinese thought, legalism, in particular Hanfeizi, one of the thinkers I'm going to discuss today. So basically, for the past 10 years, I was trying to defend Confucianism, but now I'm trying to defend the arch enemy of Confucianism, legalism. But in general, I think what I'm trying to do is really to make Chinese philosophy great again. That's my motto. So that's the background of this talk. And so in this talk, I'm going to compare Hanfeizi, the legalist thinker, and Mencius, a Confucian thinker, and also Plato's idea of how to defend a small state. So very specific topic. And actually, a reason for me to choose this topic is that in the first panel, two of the presenters were talking about issues of war. So I thought that might be something going well with other presenters. So that's a little bit of background. And now just about the topic itself. So first, I'm going to talk about how Hanfeizi dealt with the issue of how to defend a small state. And now a little bit background about Hanfeizi himself. Hanfeizi is actually means master. So Hanfeizi simply means master Hanfei, right? And he was from one of the 7 strong states of the warring states period in China. So in China, there was a historical period called Spring and Autumn and Warring States period. So that was a transitional period from the Western Zhou Empire to the Qin Empire. And these two empires adopted very different political institutions. And then the old institutions collapsed, and there was a transitional period. So Hanfeizi was from this transitional period. And so if we have to make a comparison, I would argue that the Western Zhou dynasty or empire before the transition was kind of like the European medieval regimes, the feudal regimes. It's just 2,000 years before the Europeans' feudal regimes, roughly from 1150 BCE to 770 BCE, right? And then what emerged after the transition, the Qin Empire, was a centralized bureaucracy. If we follow Max Weber's definition of modernity, the Qin Empire will be the first politically modern state in human history. Actually, Francis Fukuyama, the American political scientist, made just that observation. But the Qin dynasty was founded in 221 BCE. So again, 2,000 years before the Europeans entered modernity. So in a way, the Spring and Autumn and Warring States period is the Chinese transition to some kind of modernity. So I know that's a very unconventional thesis. I'm not going to defend that thesis, but that's just kind of the background, right? Hanfeizi was facing with a world where there were de facto sovereign states competing for world domination. Of course, now we know that's not the world, that was just China, but to the Chinese back then, that was the world. We didn't know there was India, the Roman Empire, things like that. We didn't know. We thought that was the world. So it was kind of a period of world war for China. And among the states, there were 7 that were strongest. Among the 7, so Hanfeizi came from the state of Han, one of the 7 strongest states. But among the 7 strong states, the state of Han was the weakest. So the issue Han Feizi obsessed with was how to preserve his home state, the state of Han. And so I'm going to first talk about his own strategy, how to save his state. And one more thing about Han Feizi, before I go into the details. So Han Feizi was often compared with Machiavelli and Hobbes, and also the Indian thinker Kautilya, right? I'm not sure I pronounced the name right. We have scholars of Indian culture here, so the political advisor in early Indian history, and also he was compared to some similar thinkers in the Islamic tradition, and so he was he's considered some kind of political realist, right? So that's the kind of thinker he was, and so in his times, a lot of people, intellectuals, political advisors running around giving political advice to kings of different states, right? And one very popular political advice was that the most, if you resort to diplomacy or international strategy, you might achieve the status of the leader of the whole world, right? At least you can bring security to your state. So the idea that really diplomacy is the most important thing to guarantee security of your state. And Han Feizi is going to challenge exactly that thesis. So I'll leave part of his thesis aside, but focus on how he talked about the defense of a small state. Right? He said that the king of a small state might be told that how you save your state by entering alliance with a bigger and stronger state, right? And that's how you can save yourself in this jungle of world domination. And however, Han said, think about it, right? I mean, for him, just like for Hobbes and Machiavelli, every human being is self-interested, right? And states are just a collection of self-interested human beings. So states are self-interested as well, right? So no state would do things out of virtue, out of morality. Therefore, in order for a greater power to offer alliance, right, potential protection to a smaller state, the larger state will demand something for that protection. So Han is saying that for a smaller state to enter alliance with larger state, before you get the real protection, you need to give something to the larger state in exchange for a treaty of protection, right? Either, I mean, in his times, the smaller state had to say give up a city, right, or a few cities, or gave the map of the state to the larger state. Back then there were not many maps, so to give the map to the larger state means that now you're exposed to the mercy of a larger state, or maybe send your heir to the larger state, right? So according to Han Feizi, before the smaller state could get any protection, it loses some national interest already. Okay. However, when the smaller state really needs protection from the larger state, because every state is self-interested, right? When the smaller state needs protection from larger state against the invasion of another larger state, naturally, the larger state in alliance with the smaller state would find excuses not to enter a war with another larger state, right? Because that would threaten the interests of the larger state that is in an alliance with the smaller state. So according to Han Feizi, then if you put all this together, it means that in order to get protection from a larger state, what is guaranteed is the loss of your national interests, right? but the protection is not guaranteed, right? So it's really a bad bargain for a smaller state. But then, he tries to answer some challenges. He said, why do people run? Why are people running around saying that? Look at, say, it's the state of Qin. The state of Qin is the strongest among the seven, and the state of Qin is the state that finally conquered all other states and unified China, right? So he said, maybe some people will say, the state of Qin is using diplomacy and seems to be quite successful, right? So that shows that diplomacy actually works. But he said that no, you're mistaken, right? And the reason that he gave an analogy, he said that people with a lot of money could appear to be good at making money, right? So the idea that, it's sort of like diplomacy is sort of like going to Las Vegas or Macau, right? To going to a casino, right? To gamble. And the rule of gamble is that the house always wins, right? The games are so designed that if you play the game repeatedly, the players will lose. The house eventually wins, right? In the case of diplomacy, right, the loss of national interest is guaranteed, but the protection is not guaranteed. So it means that statistically speaking, the law, if you play the game again, you will lose. However, if you have a lot of money and you go to a casino, it may take years for you to lose everything, right? And so what he's trying to say is that the state of Qin seems to be good at diplomacy. It's not really that it is good at diplomacy. It loses very slowly. It has the resources to lose. But for a small state, maybe one gamble, you lose everything, right? So don't be fooled by the appearance of the state of Qin being good at playing diplomatic games. No one is good at playing that kind of games, right? Then what is the hope for a small state to protect itself? And he said that, Han Bei said that, the only hope is to make your own state as strong as possible, right? So how do you make your state strong? Two things, economy and military, right? So if you use rewards and punishments, right? And then you move people to produce things the state actually needs. Back then, agriculture was the main source of economic output, right? So just use rewards and punishments and lead people, right, through the mechanism of rewards and punishments, through institutions that are built on rewards and punishments. So allure people into production, right? And also use rewards and punishments to encourage them to fight for the state. Actually, literally, he used the term "make the people die for the state," right? So it sounds pretty brutal, right? You make people die for the state. But if you think about it, by that claim, he means that you use rewards and punishments, right? If you give people rewards that are rich enough, they're going to be willing to sacrifice their lives for that reward. Maybe if they die, they couldn't get the reward, their family can get the reward, right? And also use punishment, right? Again, it sounds cruel, but if you think about it, there's another thing that is actually more cruel he doesn't use. Namely, he never said we can use patriotism or nationalism or any kind of ism to brainwash people into sacrificing their lives for free, right? That's really a peculiar phenomenon, because I mentioned the warring states period in China was quite comparable to the early modern period of European history. And patriotism and nationalism and a lot of isms were invented in that period. I think one function is precisely to make people die for the state for free, right? So it's quite curious why Han Bei and no Chinese thinker at that time was using patriotism or nationalism as a way to encourage people to die for the state. So that's a really interesting issue. So I'll just put that issue aside. So he doesn't. So although he said that, make people die for the state, but at least he gives something for the deaths of the common people, reward, right? Or of course punishment. And but he knows that even if you use all these tools, a small state might not be able to survive from attack, the attack from another stronger state, especially you're surrounded by all these hostile states. Then he said, don't worry, all you need to achieve is to defend your state for a relatively longer period of time, say 6 months, right? If you, as long as you can defend yourself against the invasion of a stronger state for 6 months, you're safe. The reason that when a stronger state attacks you, it will expose itself to the attacks from other stronger states. Other stronger states will take advantage of this opportunity. And so other stronger states will save you, will protect you, not out of sort of altruistic care for your state, rather for them to gain something from another stronger state, right? So that's his proposal. And if you look at history, actually, things like that happened quite a few times, right? When Vietnam was, northern Vietnam was being attacked by the U.S., right? And after a while, China and the Soviet Union intervened, right? Not necessarily for saving Vietnam, but actually for destabilizing the American domination, right? And so that's basically Han Pei's strategy. Now I'm going to move on to Plato, right? The ancient Greek thinker. So Plato is often understood as this kind of idealist, even kind of crazy idealist, right? But interestingly enough, in the Republic, in Plato's Republic, Socrates, Plato's mouthpiece, right? So Socrates. So someone forgot to turn on the speaker. So Socrates was trying to construct an ideal city. So in this ideal city, wealth is not encouraged. So one of his interlocutors asked him, then if your city, ideal city, is small and poor, how could it defend itself, right? And Socrates' answer is very positive. He said that, if my city, the ideal city, is being attacked by one city, that might be troublesome. But if it's being attacked by two cities or two city-states, then actually we'll have a good chance to save our city. And then he explains why he said this very puzzling thing. He said, first of all, the guardians, the rulers of my city are devoted to the protection of the city, right? And they're well-trained, so they're very good fighters. Just think about Sparta, right? So they're very good fighters, so 100 fighters on my city maybe can defeat 300 fighters or 800 fighters from another city, right? But still, the issue is that what if the other city is much bigger than this ideal city? And he said that, that's why I'm saying if there are two cities that are attacking us, we're safe, because we can go to one of the two cities and give them an offer they couldn't refuse, right? So the idea that, okay, and we can tell them, here's your choice, right? Either fight with another big city against us, but our soldiers are well trained, and so you're going to lose a lot before you can conquer us. Moreover, wealth production is now encouraged in my city, so even if you conquer my city, you couldn't get much from that conquest. Instead, you could become ally with us, right? And then attack your partner, the other big fat city instead, right? And their armies are now well trained, and they have a lot of money, right? And we don't really care about money. We're not, our rulers are not even touch gold. Therefore, it's easier for you to defeat another city, and you can get much more by this conquest, right? And so naturally, one of the two cities will be persuaded by us, right? But then what if there is only one invading city or invading state? And Socrates said, don't worry, right? For any very large city, there are always more than one cities. Namely, there are, in today's terms, there are classes. There are different groups of people not liking each other. In particular, the rich versus the poor, right? Think about the American presidential candidate John Edwards' famous "Two Americas" speech, right? And there are two Americas: the rich ones and the poor ones. And so you can talk to one group and tell them, let's form an ally, let's overturn the other group. You can have all the money and land and women of the other group, and we're not going to get anything. So you can destabilize the invader by instigating kind of class struggle within that city. And again, if we think about the Vietnam War, that seems to be the case, right? The American, eventually Americans lost that war, partly because there were internal class struggles in America, especially the anti-war movements, right? That really destroyed the American war effort, right? So that's the proposal from the Republic. And so I think it's, I think it's kind of interesting. In spite of this kind of idealist image of Plato, he offered actually a very realistic, very cold, realistic strategy in the Republic. And Han Fei's strategy and actually Plato's strategy can be combined, right? On the one hand, try to make your state as strong as possible, and then wait for the assistance from another stronger state. But Socrates would add, maybe just don't wait for it. Go to other states, right, and find your ally. But don't make enter alliance, beforehand. You only do it when the war comes to you, right? So I think these two realist proposals complement each other pretty well. And finally, let me come down to Mencius, another warring states thinker from China. Mencius is a kind of so-called Confucian thinker. He is often labeled as the most important Confucian, second only to Confucius himself. And Mencius has this image of this overly idealistic thinker. And in the text, the Mencius, he once said that as long as you practice humane or benevolent governance, you can become the leader of the whole world, even if you're only a ruler of a tiny state. So that sounds incredibly naive, right? However, if you look at whom he was talking to when he said this, he was talking to a leader of one of the 7 strong states. Actually, probably one of the strongest. Once the strongest, but it's not as strongest anymore, but it's pretty strong. However, when he was actually talking to the ruler of a tiny but relatively benevolent state, all this idealism disappeared. So I tend to understand that the idealistic message he offered should be understood as rhetorical, right? He only when he tried to encourage leaders of strong states to be humane, he used that kind of rhetoric. But when he was talking to the leader of smaller state, even if the state is very humane, he didn't appeal to morality or virtue anymore. Instead, he gave this ruler 2 proposals. 2 ways you can save your state. One, strengthen your defense, right? The typical realist strategy: strengthen your defense, and then fight for your state to death. If your people are willing to die with you, then there is a chance, right? It sounds like what Han Fei is saying: make people die for you, right? But there is a crucial difference. For Mencius, one way to save your state is your people are willingly dying for your state, right? Out of their own choice, presumably because you're such a good ruler. They rather die with you than without you, right? Survive without you. So that's one alternative. The other alternative is that he said that look at let's take a look at an ancient sage ruler, right? His state was being attacked, and he couldn't shake off the attackers. Then he said to his people, the reason I asked you to fight for our state is to protect our land, which is the purpose of which is to serve you, the people, right? So it makes no sense if I ask all of you to sacrifice yourself to save the land that is meant to serve you, right? So he says, I give up. So I'm going to run to another place. You can have a different ruler. And then the people say, this is really a benevolent ruler. Let's follow him. So they follow him to a safe place. And after a few generations, this tiny state finally becomes a strong state and eventually conquered all of China and founded the Western Zhou dynasty, the dynasty before the Spring, Autumn, and Warring States period, right? So basically, Mencius said that there are two choices, right? Either die with your full state. Let's see if people follow you to death, or run away. Let's see people will follow you to wherever you go, right? I think what is implied here is that for Mencius, not every defensive warfare is justified. I mean, today we tend to think invasion is always, unprovoked invasion is always wrong. Defense is always right. But for Mencius, only the defense of a fully humane or benevolent state is fully legitimate, right? But of course, whenever a state is being attacked, it always claims itself to being attacked, wrongly, right? So for Mencius, there's a way we can see whether the invasion is the attack is fully illegitimate or not. The way we can tell is whether the people of the state that is being invaded are willing to defend the state, are willing to follow the rulers of the state, right? So more generally speaking, I wrote somewhere else that for Mencius, the principle of international relations is really humane duty overrides sovereignty, right? Humane being the Chinese translation of the Confucian term 人, which can also be translated as benevolence. So humane duty overrides sovereignty. So sovereignty can only be justified on the condition of how humane the ruler of state is to the people. So in that sense, not every defensive war can be justified, can be fully justified. Only the defense of a fully human state can be justified. Okay, and just to sum up, so we have three strategies, right? And maybe we could put all these three strategies together as a kind of ideal strategy, right? And first of all, as I already mentioned, we should follow the principle that not all defensive wars can be justified. A fully just war of self-defense has to be a defense of a human state, and there have to be signs of how humane the state is. So it's not up to the rulers. Rather, we see whether the people are willing to defend, to follow the rulers, follow the regime, follow the government, wherever the government goes, right? And of course, in real life, no state is fully humane. No war is fully legitimate. But Mencius offers a kind of a criterion for reality to be measured against, right? And then, in particular, in defense, the internal economic and military strength is the most important thing. However, Mencius would add, a benevolent government would produce economic and military strength, and that strength is more sustainable than following the kind of legalist strategy, use only people's self-interest, rewards, and punishments, right? So virtue, to care for virtue is a realistic thing, according to Mencius. And then in a kind of multi-state environment, diplomacy is also very important, right? And the small state that tries to save itself should take advantage of diplomacy, form alliance with a stronger state to create troubles for the attackers, right? And this means that it's in the smaller state's interest to protect a multi-state international system, right? And I think if we put all this together, we have something both realistic and idealistic. Using the American philosopher John Rawls' term, so that's, I think, what a political philosopher should try to come up with, kind of realistic utopia. So so here's a small example of this realistic utopia. I'll just stop here. Thank you.